One.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Garbage Time Takes. But this is not another podcast episode. Instead, we want to give you a little weekend video recapping our favorite teams and their performances in today's college football games. Just some gut reactions, instant recap for Dennis and UC, me and Michigan, and Bob and MSU. Two of us happened to pull out victories today. Bob, some unfortunate, play from his MSU Spartans. Dennis, why don't you start us off with, some Cincinnati talk and what you saw from their victory over the previously unbeaten Indiana Hoosiers? Were they outmatched, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, they were, and I think this is just a perfect example of how Cincinnati's better than the Big Ten. But it, I was expecting more of a reaction there. I thought that was gonna.
That's because it was just so absurd that it couldn't even warrant a reaction. That's why.
I could
Too
not
far.
even put into comprehensions my disgust, Dennis.
It's
That's how sickening
too
that
far
was.
off the deep end. Too far off the deep end. Oh, well, it was a 45-24 victory for Cincinnati over Indiana today, and it doesn't really put into context the domination, especially in the first half, because it was 38-10 at halftime. Absolutely rolled them, and then in the second half really started to take the foot off the gas and played a lot more conservative football, weren't really pushing the ball downfield, which we had success doing early in the game, and a lot of punting from the Cincinnati offense and not continuing drives down the field in the second half. But we had busted open such a good lead, and the defense held strong there in the second half and didn't really allow Indiana's offense to do much of anything either. So hats off to the defense. The whole team played well.
Dennis,
Ben Bryant still a quarterback.
does UC have a problem closing that's going to come back to bite them in American Conference play if they can't put their foot down and score 70 points? I mean, come on, Dennis, 38 points at the half and you didn't even break 50.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I see what you're saying, but it was the opposite last week against Miami because we were down 10-0 early and completely flipped the script. So it was almost the opposite in that sense. Is we started out really, really hot today and kind of just faded down the stretch, but had a big enough lead. And last week it was the complete opposite. So I'm not worried about their ability to come back from being down and or close games. That's not a concern.
Dennis, one last question, Dennis. Is Ben Bryant him?
Ben Bryant is maybe him. I mean,
Give me a break.
listen to this: 354 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and it was on a tipped pass that was just slightly overthrown, but should have been caught, honestly. So I'm not concerned about the play of Ben Bryant. And one thing I'll say about Ben Bryant watching this game today, especially in the second half, he had a lot of time and was still failing to make decisions. And you could just, his feet were working really quickly. He was very antsy to do something, and it just looked like there was a couple moments of panic. To me, anyway, it just kind of looked like he needed to make a decision with what he was going to do a lot faster than he did holding onto the ball. It's interesting. Quarterbacks in Cincinnati apparently have a problem with holding onto the ball. But yeah, I mean,
what do you know?
all in all, it looked really good. Didn't really have much of a rushing attack today. A lot of things were through the air. And so we really won this game with Ben Bryant. And then I had to mention, shout out to Tyler Scott, the receiver, 10 receptions, 185 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 75-yard touchdown early on in the game. And I think I mentioned him on the pod before. I was telling you guys about the candle man, the candle scent guy, Tyler
Correct.
Scott. So apparently he can play football too, as well as enjoy scented candles.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, you mentioned how your previous statement was a little bit off the deep end. Bob, the deep end was drained, the woodshed was burned down, and MSU was chopped up today by the Gophers, and they were rowing the boat all over you. That was, what happened, Bob? What happened?
Well, you see, a couple of key points to this game here. I hope nobody spent any time watching this game because it was a barf-inducing
I didn't.
slugfest that
I know Derek did.
really just consisted of Minnesota pinning us to the ground and repeatedly punching us as there's blood coming out of our nose and we're clearly incapacitated. However, I just like to, I'm a man of stats, I'm a man of numbers, and I just like to give some people a couple numbers today to really give a takeaway to this game. Peyton Thorne, starting quarterback for the MSU Spartans, 132 yards passing on 24 attempts with 2 picks, with a QBR on the day, scale of 0 to 100, of 10. That is just not going to hack it.
Bobby, the Indiana quarterback had a 56 QBR.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Now, I'd just like to mention, I will say, Peyton Thorne was egregious and horrendous. However, I would like to point out Tanner Morgan had a QBR of 97.8 out of 100 today. So that tells you what our defense did to stop him in any sense of the word. Now, they did absolutely nothing to stop him because they allowed 17 points in the first half and the same thing in the second half. So no game plan adjustments, even if it was the third stringers in at the end. Now, the more concerning issue that maybe arising is the fact that I already mentioned that we had a 10 QBR quarterback trying out there today. Let's get him some backup in the run game, right? Let's try to take some pressure off of him.
That's a great idea.
How about 14 carries total today for 38 yards for a grand total of 2.7 yards a carry? Our leading rusher today had 23 yards on the ground. Just not going to get it done. And so, I mean, I didn't even mention that Peyton Thorne fumbled the ball as we were darn near on the goal line. So, when you look at it from this perspective, I mean, I am glad I had tempered expectations for this team coming into the season.
Yeah, your preseason predictions were very much realistic.
Because here's the thing.
Because it's hard to replace Kenneth Walker.
It is hard to replace Kenneth Walker, but also here's the thing. When you quite literally can't stop anybody on defense at any time. I mean, the amount of punts that our defense has forced in the last 2 weeks has been so minimal that, I mean, even if the offense was playing good, I don't know if it really would make much of a difference, because when you're allowing 35 points-ish a game, it's just, you're not going to win a lot of games. And when you're only when Tanner Morgan only didn't complete 3 passes on the day, that's going to be a long day at work for you. And when the Minnesota rushing attack goes for the same amount of yards as you manage as an entire offense, that's also not going to get it done. With 48 carries for 240 yards of offense, averaging 5 yards a carry for Minnesota. So you can't stop the run, you can't stop the pass, and you're passing it to the other team on offense. Not going to be a whole lot of success. I got about one more game left in me before I need to see Noah Kim, who actually was quite effective in garbage time.
He was
6 for 7 passing for 70 yards with a QBR in his time in of 97.6. So effective in his time in. We'll like to see that, even though it was garbage time. But I mean,
our namesake, Bob. Our namesake. Garbage time.
Nobody showed up. A complete lack of life from the Michigan State Spartans today, which was sad because, it was home opener, Big Ten, and so you were hoping for better. But I mean, credit to Minnesota, they came in there, they did everything right, and no credit to us because we did everything wrong.
Yeah.
Bobby,
Bob,
I got a question for you.
Yep.
So, and just hearing you talk, I didn't watch today's game. I haven't watched much of Michigan State at all, but maybe you can enlighten me a little bit. The complete lack of running game and passing game screams at me that there's offensive line problems. Is that the case, or is this a skill position player issue from all across the board, or is it an effort issue? Like, what is the underlying issue?
So if you want my opinion on the matter, I would say that our offensive line run blocking has been terrible. We've not opened up any holes at all. We were opening up holes in the first 2 games of the season against far inferior opponents, but that's to be expected. Yeah. But once Washington hit, and once Minnesota came to town, it was a different story, because I was saying the first 2 weeks, Jarek Broussard was busting through holes at lightning speed. He was my right bench baller for the first week of the season because he would look like a lightning rod out there. He looked great. And now I'm not gonna put it all on the offensive line, but they haven't looked good. Their pass blocking has been good enough, but Peyton Thorne hasn't been that good. I mean, this week he was very bad. Last week he was average, and all the other weeks he was probably below average. So that's just not going to help you out. But the pass protection's been. I haven't been noticing myself being angry at the pass protection. I've been more noticing myself be angry at easy missed throws or 2 yards in a cloud of dust from the Michigan State offense in the running game, because quite frankly, most of the time, and that's, I guess I will, blame our coaching staff a little bit for this. We're in 3rd and long every time. I mean, it's first 2 downs, run up the gut for 1 yard or 2 yards, and then on 3rd down, we'll try to throw, and we got to get 10 yards a pass, that's tough to do as it is. But when you have a quarterback that's struggling to hit intermediate routes, and it's not going to be easy to do. And here's the thing: even when we're in a 4-down territory, they know we're going to run it 3 times. For some reason, we're and that's just credit also to the fact that our quarterback can't complete any passes. But short of it, Dennis, run blocking horrible, pass blocking good enough, but our quarterback hasn't made up for it at all.
Right, there we go. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Bob. Offensive line just is not generating any push. And Minnesota's defense played a bunch of cupcakes and so is statistically very good. But, the strength of MSU for years has been the O-line. I think that's where the large majority of draft picks from MSU have gone into the NFL is off the offensive line. Centers, guards. The Allen brothers are 2 right off the top of my head where I'm like, those dudes were menaces.
Conklin.
But yeah, Bob, back-to-back weeks with under 50 yards rushing. Last week against Washington, 29 attempts, 42 yards.
How are you going to win any? How are you going to win any? How are you going to win any games when you can't run for 50 yards? I mean,
the other component of that is, their rushing attempts are so low because they keep digging themselves these early holes. That's back-to-back weeks where the opposing team either scores and then MSU goes 3 and out on like 2 straight drives.
Yep. I mean, it was 14-0 before you could even turn on the TV. So,
correct.
I mean that's true, but I mean, quite difference from last year. The main thing so far is we've been able to put up absolutely 0 big plays. I mean, we have not caught any defensive lapses so far. We have not, caught one, deep ball that's went for a touchdown, broke one run loose. I mean, even the defensive forcing turnovers has not been great. I mean,
the forced fumbles, yes. You guys have 2 guys. One of them has 5 forced fumbles. The other has 3, and the large majority of teams in FBS don't even have 5 forced fumbles as a team. So I will give your D-line credit for their fumble forcing.
Yeah, and here's where I would come back at you on that, is that a lot of that was during the first 2 weeks. We were calling turnovers. We were calling turnovers left and right against Akron and garbage time city. But when we've gotten to Washington and Minnesota, I mean, we had one fumble recovery today when it was out of reach. We had, last week, I don't think if my memory serves me, we had anything. So, I mean,
true.
That's not helping. However, I would be fine if they weren't forcing any turnovers, if they could force some punts. But the punters get a day off when they come to play Michigan State.
Lack of forcing from Michigan State's defense whatsoever on any front.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a rough one. I watched the whole game because I got a sick enjoyment out of it because I'm a strong Mel Tucker hater. It's not even all MSU, but I just think Mel Tucker's an overrated bozo who absolutely fleeced Michigan State boosters for $100 million. This was, from what I saw online, Mel Tucker has lost 16 games, and 13 of them have been by double digits over his time at Colorado and MSU. And so, I mean, when MSU loses, they get beat. And for a team where your head coach has been a defensive coordinator in the NFL and has been a secondary coach in the NFL and the worst part of your team is your secondary, that's just not a good look. And I think with, Kenneth Walker hit a lot of deficiencies last year, across the board, because part of the reason why I think MSU isn't getting a lot of deep shots is because people don't respect their running game that much anymore. And until that changes, they're not going to have those play action plays over the top, or even just normal, go routes over the top where they've had to bring the safety down into the box to, protect against Kenneth Walker busting 12-yard runs every other play. And so I think MSU right now is currently facing an identity crisis on offense, and then just, a complete lack of competent I don't know if it's scheme or if it's players or if it's both in the secondary. But I mean, I texted the group chat. Through 2 drives, it felt like every single one of Minnesota's pass completions went for 10 yards plus. Every single one.
Because they were. It was 13 yards there, 15 yards here, 20 yards
and
here.
No resistance. It was hardly any.
And it was
resistance.
Every single play. It was just like they were one first down after another marching down the field. And then they'd throw on a run, and then that would be 20 yards. So
yeah, Minnesota's a good team, but I'm still not convinced. I don't know if this is more of an indictment on MSU or if it's more credit to Minnesota, probably a little bit of both. But Bob, I got one last question for you. Are the John L. Smith dark ages among us? If I would have lost to Maryland next week, signaled the dark ages. Because let me tell you who you guys have coming up on the schedule.
I know. Maryland, Ohio State,
Wisconsin, Michigan, yep. In that order. And then you get Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana, and Penn State. So these next 4 games, there's a very realistic future where MSU is 2-6. And that is a far cry from where they were a year ago. So what do you think, Bob? Is John L. Smith, is the ghost of John L. Smith back in Spartan Stadium?
I mean,
with a loss to Maryland next week.
No, because Maryland
look good.
Maryland, I'm not taking anything away from Maryland. I mean, I think they're definitely decent. I mean, they've got a passing attack, they've got a competent quarterback, and for all we know, that's plenty enough to beat us. Because like you said, as long as you can pitch and catch, unless we're gonna suddenly find a backbone in the defensive backfield, which is not looking likely, we've got no chance. Now, I mean, I expected us to lose to all 3 of Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Michigan, so that's not really an issue. That's not an issue for me. I guess I expected us to beat Michigan, but that was more my heart speaking than my head. Because what would I be if I said that we're going to lose that game? And I'm still picking us to win that game, by the way. Don't you get in your head for a second that I've turned on that yet. But we've got to see at least 2 years of repeated failure for me to declare John L. Smith dark ages have returned. Because
do 2 out of 3 years not count?
We gotta have consecutive. We gotta have consecutive. We gotta have consecutive years.
I was gonna be on your side anyway because I threw out the COVID year as well. Everyone always, when Michigan fans talk crap about MSU, they always say Jim Harbaugh hasn't beat Mel Tucker, and I'm like, that COVID year, schmovid year, that was such a nonsense year. Where yes, legitimately beat us last year, but that COVID year is a wash in my own personal opinion.
I mean, it's got to be a couple years consecutive for me to consider John L. Smith era. But next year at this point, I've got to think we'll be better than this. So I'm not going to look too far ahead yet, but no, John L. Smith era is not among us yet. Got to be, if we were at this point next year, I could be saying the John L. Smith era is among us.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say this. Wisconsin absolutely got rolled by Ohio State tonight. So you never know. And then with Maryland coming in, Maryland looked pretty darn good. And I haven't heard a better transition than that, I don't think, because, that leads right to you, Derek.
Well, you see,
Dennis.
one more thing. You see, the problem is, Dennis, The only game out of those that he mentioned, or the next three that we mentioned that are at home, I don't remember the Michigan game, but I know the only game out of those
Michigan games in Ann Arbor.
okay. So the only thing out of the next four that are at home, the only one that is at Spartan Stadium is Ohio State.
Wisconsin is also at home.
Oh, my bad. Okay, so Wisconsin's at home, but we have to go to Maryland. That's probably the most winnable game, and then we're gonna have to. We're not gonna beat Ohio State. That's gonna be. If you have any money in any of your, I'll give you a free garbage time to take your money. If you got any money in your FanDuel, your DraftKings, put a 30-point spread bet on that one because that's gonna be like 50-12, probably.
Oh no.
So, I mean, Noah Kim will be in by the second quarter if he's not starting by that point.
That's the last thing I wanted to ask, Bob. QB controversy in East Lansing. Could there be one? Could Noah Kim end up usurping Peyton Thorne? MSU fans love to make fun of Michigan fans for always calling for the next quarterback, and here they are in week 4 saying Noah Kim season. So is there a quarterback controversy in East Landfill?
I don't know. I gotta see a couple. I think I gotta see a couple more bad games from Peyton. I'm not.
And see Noah Kim against.
How many bad games do you have to see from Peyton? How many?
Dennis.
Next week. I think next week is a make or break game for Peyton.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I was trying to get at is that next week, if he plays bad next week, I'm gonna understand why people are calling for Noah Kim. But I mean, to be honest, like here's my thing. My faith in the MSU Spartans doesn't really go up that much with Noah Kim going in. That's the thing. Like you can call for the next guy, but
there's just too many deficiencies on the defensive side of the football.
But the defense still stinks. The running game still stinks, and maybe we can complete a few more passes. But I mean, Noah Kim's never started any big games before. Now you're just going to throw him into the fire with never having seen him before in starting action. I can't expect him to be like I'm not going to expect him to be leaps and bounds better. I mean, it's one thing to go 6 of 7 in garbage time against Minnesota, but it's another thing to go out and have a game plan for you and have another team try to execute that game plan and you be better.
Good point.
As you're like a freshman. So I'm not even if he comes in, I'm not too hyped.
Good points, Bob. Well, Dennis, thanks for that transition. Talking about Maryland. Yeah, a couple minutes ago. That's all right. MSU's next appointment, they'll be going to the Shell. I think that's what they call their stadium or something silly like that. Maryland gave us, a really good game today. Michigan coming off of, 3 cupcake non-conference opponents, self-admitted. We were tested early. You think, if Maryland doesn't start the game by letting the opening kickoff bounce off their face, it could have been a very different game. But Blake Corum, man. Blake Corum is something special. Over 240 yards rushing. I think he had 243 yards rushing. Let me pull up my stats real quick. Yes. Blake Corum, 243 yards on 30 carries and 2 tubs. J.J. McCarthy was 18 for 26 with 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a couple fumbles that were fortunately recovered. Some, mistimed throws that, weren't really the best decisions to be made. And he was a little bit off on the timing on the deep ball throughout the game. He ended up hitting one, an actually huge play, late third down, early in the fourth quarter. But Maryland's a good team. That's a team that could very easily win 8 games. And maybe, Michigan haters will say that's copium for trying to explain away a potentially overrated Michigan football team. But Maryland's we know what Talia Tagovailoa is. And I guess their wide receivers are pretty good as well. They went a bit away from the running game, which I thought was favorable for us because they were kind of having their way with us a little bit. Defensive front 7, rough. We didn't really generate a pass rush with the front 4 unless we were bringing additional blitzers. So overall, there's a lot of good things for Michigan football to take away from this game. You got the job done first and foremost. That's priority number one. Priority number two, your only turnover was when your freshman running back fumbled on his only carry. And number three, your defense and special teams played, or your special teams specifically played well, and your secondary was really good. Linebackers in D line, a little shaky, but the secondary was tested often, and a lot of those completions that Maryland got was more of a result of Talia having all the time in the world in the pocket, and DBs can only cover for so long. But yeah, Michigan's ground game hasn't gone anywhere, which I think is, a big thing. Starters got to play a full 4 quarters, and you got to see, face a little bit of adversity before you go into Kinnick Stadium next week. So overall, I'd give us like a B grade, not great, but like not horrible. We left some points on the board with JJ missing some deep shots. He said his arm is feeling 110%. And so maybe he's just feeling a little juiced up and has got to find the touch and dial it back a little bit. A lot of his deep throws looked pretty linear. And then the one he ended up hitting late in the game had a lot more touch and float to it. So I imagine those are things that get worked out. A lot of very fixable problems for this Michigan team. And for those of you who remember last year, Rutgers gave us a scare early. They gritted out a near victory over us in week 4 at the Big House last season. So for a lot of Michigan fans who are pressing the panic button and saying Ohio State's going to kill us, let's not jump to conclusions just yet.
I mean, that sounds fair to me. Dennis, what grade would you give the Bengals today? Or not the Bengals, the Bearcats today. I think that was a good metric.
Yeah, that is a good metric. I mean, it was the tail two halves, so I gotta put it together. I mean, first half
B+.
A+, second half probably like B-. So I think I'm gonna even that out with maybe I'll stay on the side of caution and say overall on the day was a B+. Indiana shot themselves in the foot a couple of times, which helped us out and wasn't necessarily our doing, but still, when you're beating a Big Ten school of basically doubling up a Big Ten school, just about, even if it's one that is not necessarily a powerhouse in football, I'll take it all day long, and it looked good, so B+.
Fair enough.
That's fair.
Bob, what would you give?
Yeah, I hate to do this to you. You got to
State's
give them a grade though.
F. And
Oh,
yeah, it's just unfortunately there's no
It's
way
fair,
I can
though.
go any better than F. And
are the Spartans on academic probation currently?
well, they got 2 Fs straight, so 3 in a row would be academic probation, and that would be
We're
disastrous.
monitoring the GPA as we speak. I mean, it's getting low.
I mean, we started off with a couple Bs, a couple Bs, a couple B pluses, and then we had 2 Fs. So we need to come back. we need to pull it back. We need to pull it back a little bit, so we don't flunk out.
Yeah. But yeah, well, that'll pretty much wrap it up for this sort of gut reaction little episode. We hope you guys enjoyed. We appreciate you watching. Bob, you want to plug the socials real quick before we wrap it up?
At Garbage Time Takes on Instagram, at Garbage Time Takes on Twitter, and check out the link in the description for our websites and all our written content.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoy this special weekend episode. And with that, we'll see you next week for the official next podcast. So in 3,
1, peace.
Peace.